I'll start with a dozen things that I really like about Father Seraphim. I like his extreme, serious approach to life, his keen intelligence that drills down to details, his great research ability. Relatedly, his command of all areas of academic discipline, his translations from Russian sources, and so on. All right. I like his emergence from alcohol abuse and homosexual activity in his 20s. I like his emergence from Eastern mysticism, Gnosticism, etc., all of that. I do like his enjoyment of the arts, literature and theatre and so on. He liked cats. I like his abilities, editorial, as a publisher and as a writer, an essayist. I like his love and concern for his country and its people. And number 12, I like his desire to be helpful to others. Right, here's a dozen things I don't like about him. I don't like his Protestant style of calling out others, even to their face. I don't like his supreme overriding confidence in his own analytical abilities regarding world, social, and church events. I don't like his supreme confidence in his ability to direct souls that place themselves under obedience to him. I don't like his romanticism regarding the Desert Fathers and his view of monasticism, which I think is a continuation and a displacement of his earlier obsession with Eastern style philosophy and mysticism. Okay, I don't like his lack of experience as a novice in monastic life. I don't like his disobedience after his tonsure as a monk to both his abbot, his egomon, and his bishop, Anthony. Shocking. I don't like his obsession and passion for what he thinks is his missionary project in publishing and teaching. I don't like his reliance on an expired blessing from St. John Maximovich to justify his own disobedience. I don't like his brazen public polemical activity while he's a monk. I don't like his establishment of a place of pilgrimage, i.e. Platina, to further misguide disaffected and confused people, whether young or old. I don't like that Platina, this place of pilgrimage, allowed Father Herman to perpetrate his predatory homosexual activity on visiting youth, or to flounce about as a guru. And number 12, I don't like that he stubbornly kept Platina outside the management of his own church's administration. All right, comment. You'll see that the things I like about him all pertain to the man Eugene Rose. He cleaned up his life. He educated himself. He came to true faith, Orthodox. He tried to be helpful. He used his abilities well. I can imagine him these days on the internet. Eugene Rose, a great podcast, an academic, an author, a speaker. However, I do think he was a child of his times. The 60s and 70s were besotted with Eastern mysticism and philosophy. And I think Father Seraphim transferred this besotment, this focus, onto and into his view of the Desert Fathers. I think Father Seraphim romanticized monasticism. Now, Rocor in those days was well prepared to entertain such fantasies as these. And I don't think Rocor would let something like Platina happen these days. Now, okay, Karen. Father Seraphim is attractive in many ways. and he elicits a lot of sympathy. However, I think he never lost his Protestant style of being oppositional and contentious, even until the end of his life. He died so young. His carping style is grating to someone like me with a Roman Catholic background. But I suspect his carping, contentious, oppositional style might even go unnoticed by those with Protestant roots. Anyway, that still would have been fine to be like that for the layman Eugene. I had no problem with that at all. But as a monk, things are quite different. Now, it's the idea of his monastic condition, and it's his idea of the monastic condition that his supporters maintain, I'll describe it shortly, that makes him seem special. So I'll say that again. It's the idea of Father Seraphim's monastic condition that makes him seem special to his followers. Now, on the one hand, it elicits sympathy because people assume ascesis and self-sacrifice. However, I'm not seeing that. And why? Well, in terms of rustic living, rough living, well, who doesn't live rough? Willingly or unwillingly. Primitive conditions don't mean you're a saint. All right. Here's another thing. Neither does the renunciation of a debauched, degenerate lifestyle mean you're a saint. This is expected of everyone willy-nilly. Okay, neither does writing theologically, neither does writing polemically, neither does missionary activity, educational endeavors, etc. Guarantee sanctity. None of those are a sign of sanctity. Further, when people see the dreadlocked beard and the none too clean robes, okay, a certain romanticism continues to kick in for North Americans because, well, it looks unworldly, but that's all. I think North Americans are so keen to have a homegrown saint of their own, and I think that this romanticism continues, so it's not new, continues the 70s idealism that had besotted Eugene Rose himself. Right. Now, I'm not condemning Father Seraphim Rose, but I'm analysing his monastic condition, and I think it was woefully deficient. Right. Why? Well, that he lived to give free rein to his own ambitions. We'll get onto that in a second. That he died in ignominy. The death, I'm referring to the reports of his deathbed. Right. And I'm referring to that the establishment of Platina ended very, very badly. Bad for everybody. I think that he was a romanticist, and he remained a romanticist. He was without supervision and guidance, and I think he was deluded and unaware of his own delusion. I saw nothing in his letters that indicated that he was aware that he was subject to delusion. I think that he externalized and projected his criticisms, his views, his critical views onto others, and seeing a lack of obedience in them, but projecting his own lack of obedience onto them. Classic projection and externalization. But, okay, here's a strong point. I think it was excusable because He was a child of his times, the 70s, when all sorts of weird things were happening, and encouraged and accepted as the standard norm, even in Rokor, along with multiple other religious institutions. So Father Seraphim was simply obedient to the zeitgeist of his times and to the strains within Rokor that he favoured. So there's an excuse for him. He was obedient to the zeitgeist of the times. So I believe that the case for Seraphim to be a saint is very shallow. It assumes a monasticism that simply wasn't there. Desert father, flee from bishops. So without this monastic ideal, this context of all the sympathy, all the credibility, all the mystical unworldliness surrounding him disappears, and I think that would be a really good thing. I'll tell you why later. I think he ought to have remained simply Eugene Rose, and he would have been an excellent polemicist, a debater, a scholar, a writer, a really good example of a morally reformed life, a really good voice in the North American spiritual wilderness. So if we debrand him as a monastic, I have to explain monasticism, that'll come up. If we debrand him as a monastic, then he comes into his own as a shining example of a reformed life, a great example to laity. Now, people think, what does think he's a prophet? All right, but if we debrand him as a monastic, then, and no longer a prophet, but just a steady commentator of world events, social events, and religious trends. A commentator and an analyzer and a prognosticator of future conditions, but not a prophet. Then his predictive ability in his worldly and social analyses would not be conflated with prophecy. He's not a prophet. He just has a good understanding of society, politics, and religion. That's all. Right. So the case for his glorification as a saint is essentially a romantic one, and it depends on the mythos surrounding his assumed and imagined idealized monasticism. Now, I have to report, I'm just not seeing it there. I've read the letters, his own words. Objectively speaking, it just isn't there, except in the weird, in this view, the weird 70s style free-for-all, invent-yourself sense of New Agey, even though he criticizes New Age. He is New Agey. That sense that affected Rokor and many other religious movements. So in him, instead, we have in Father Seraphim Rose a faithful child of his times, an aberration modelled on rose beards and living roughly, hearkening back to dreamy late antiquity, Byzantine style. What he thinks is Desert Father style. So let me say this clearly. If Eugene Rose embraced monasticism properly, I'm going to describe it, he would have quietly disappeared into a proper monastery, large or small, doesn't matter, and remained anonymous to the outside world. He would have submitted in obedience to his religious superiors, he would have undergone a full period of training, both as a novice and even after his tonsure as a monk. He would have dropped all of his romantic ideas about monasticism, live in the desert, flee from bishops. He would have mourned for his own sins and kept that going, out of sight of others. and given up, and now this is the important thing, he would have given up all of his ambitions. Right, what ambitions? Well, for example, regarding publishing, polemics, religious and social politics, study, education, missionary activity, social commentary. This is the real picture of monasticism that is missing among his supporters. Maybe this is a North American thing. And well, what about Platina? Right. I think Platina was an artificial phenomenon. You know, it was designed, artifice. And it was rooted, practically speaking, in the ambition of two men, both of them, Father Herman and Father Seraphim. Father Herman seemed to have wished to establish himself as a sensual, vain guru type figure, and to cultivate and have access to the society of young men, and let's just put it that way. And Father Seraphim's vanity and ambition were more intellectual. So intellectual pride. Why? Well, he was able to publish and communicate to his heart's content, criticizing everybody, living in total self-will, and as a superior figure in comparison with everyone else in his own view. So here's two things: neither fully submitting to his own canonical jurisdiction. I did a Craig Trulia there. I said canonical. And so neither submitting to his own canonical jurisdiction as Rocourt, nor to any uncanonical one like the true zealot sphere. But criticizing and everyone and remaining aloof from everyone all the time. So that's what I think Platina was for both Father Seraphim and Father Herman. Now, it seems like Platina was historically cracking at the seams even before Father Seraphim's repose. From what I gather, the relations between Father Seraphim and Herman were also cracking at the seams, like falling apart. The relationship was falling apart. It just couldn't go on. Their pairing was absolutely an artificial one, absolutely not appropriate in normal monastic life. You can't pair up like that. It allowed each of them to pursue their own vain and private ambitions, as I described before. Now, what about now, these days? Well, unfortunately, even now, it seems to be unbearable to face the truth and look back at Platina, except through rose-tinted glasses, to try and maintain the rosy view of Platina. That's a dad joke. And the temptation, looking through these rose-tinted glasses, is to blame only Father Herman, and to blame only Father Herman. Father Herman gets all the blame. Father Seraphim gets all the glory. So this is splitting, infantile splitting, child infantile psychology. To blame Father Herman only, and to ignore Father Seraphim's willful complicity and purpose in the setup at Platina. Father Seraphim is to blame for Platina just as much as Father Herman. Right. Sorry. So I think that Platina just perpetuated the confused and bewildered mess of the many converts and second generation Old Country youth believers at the time. So I'll repeat that. I think Platina just perpetuated the confusion and the bewilderment of the people that were attracted to Platina. And I think that the shipwreck of the catastrophic end at Platina was inevitable. It was baked in. Anyway, I'll end on a positive note. So I really wish instead that if we could take off the rose-tinted glasses, and then we could have. I wish it never happened. I really wish that instead we could have had the great layman Eugene Rose, scholar, professor, author, writer, missionary, speaker, educator, pious layman, a reformed sinner, an extreme mark of reform. He could, a social media influencer even. I mean, that would have been great. So I really wish that people would understand, or could understand normal monasticism in its institutional form, and not romanticize monasticism in this kind of pseudo desert father or wilderness form. I really wish that people could face the truth about the aberrant and not so good things about the 70s that affected Rokor and everybody and Father Seraphim at that time.